Ambassador Keshi, of course, you've made reference to the kind of impact it has on our national image, but then this state of affairs, how then does it affect Nigeria's relations with the nations in the international community?
Look, at the end of the day, once the results are announced and the president is declared, I said to you, there's a sentence you should watch out for in the reports of the international observers. Once they declare that, yes, there were irregularities, but not enough to affect the outcome of the total result, the international community obviously will be bound to begin to deal with the government of the day. That's the reality we've seen over the last couple of years. You know, because from all accounts, there it's been relatively impressive in some areas, and in some areas we've had some hiccups. But the most important thing is that at the end of the day, if these irregularities are not strong enough to affect the outcome of the result, and nobody declares the election not to be credible or to be fair, free, and the rest of it, the international community will settle down and work with the government that has won the election.
I also wanted to find out again, perhaps I can pose this to you, Laboris, based on what the ambassador spoke about. I mean, election observers will come, make their findings known. But remember, just before the elections, we had, there was a get-together by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, telling them, look, these are the do's and don'ts and all of that. But you begin to wonder, do the observers themselves, I mean, I posed this question to you yesterday, is there a feeling of trust or distrust, between the government of the day and the observers? Because
really, what, GT said something that's very germane. The previous segment said, this attitude of international observers coming, they look at the process. That's also what the ambassador is saying. Looking at the process, he said, well, you've tried, it's okay, it's fair. This is not, for Africa, for your standard, this is okay. The skirmishes is understandable. Ordinarily, this same standard that they judge you with, they wouldn't accept in their own environment. They expect a higher standard, when they talk about electioneering processes. But here, they look at all the processes and they just come, they observe, and they tell you, well, fair enough, there were skirmishes, but it wasn't substantial enough. Like the court would also say, in most cases, yes, we noticed irregularities, but it wasn't substantial to affect the overall outcome. And so you find out that in cases also, you hear the international community breathing down the neck of the politicians who are going to deny you entry visas to our countries, because traveling to most of these countries is very important to our politicians. The moment you become a local government chairman, the first thing you want to do, you want to ensure that, your family visits, some of these countries in Europe or in America. You want to, for medicals, you want to go to their hospitals. You're not thinking of how to come replicate some of these good things that you see in these places back at home. And so they are bound to threaten you with entry visas that if you do not comply. And then you hear the government also wanting to grandstand. We're a sovereign nation, there are do's and don'ts. You can't come and intimidate us here on what to do and what not to do. But also trying to play by the rules, as dictated by, the foreign observers. Because you also hear them telling you, look, INEC and the Nigerian military should not be seen obeying unlawful instructions. Don't obey legal instructions or lawful instructions, play by the rules. And then you now ask yourself, who actually make these rules? Because we've refused to make rules for ourselves that will also stand the test of time, it becomes possible for others, outsiders, to begin to make these rules for you. You remember also, INEC chairman in 2018 did release a 36-year calendar, all in the name of, look, let's have certainty in our election, and so we'll be able to plan. But in releasing that calendar, he also said something, that there's need to discuss around the issues revolving around the conduct of elections in Nigeria. But at what point did we discuss all of those issues? Insecurity is one of them, and then also the transparency of our electoral process is another one. We never discussed all of these things until INEC, realized that they were not prepared for election, and that's when, they started talking to us every day about the preparedness and the rest. And so when you have all of this, the trust in the electoral process, is going to be questioned. And so, because the international community cannot actually, rubber stamp or dictate for you what should happen, they just monitor. That's why they are observers. They observe the processes. But in your books, they tell you it's good. But in their own books, when they discuss elections and electoral processes, transparency, you're not good enough.
So who gains? Who wins, who loses?
Because you also find out that the reason why they come here, it's not necessarily because of what we will gain from them. It's what they want to gain from us. And so for them, it will be better to just maintain that cordiality, that corridor, so they'll be able to get what they want to get from you as at when they want it.
And then we get back to the cycle again.
Exactly.
After 4 years.
But when you want something from them, the processes and procedures, they set standards for you that you must follow. And if you don't comply, then it becomes a problem. And so that's why the ambassador is saying that we need to sit back, look at our processes and ask ourselves, how can we get it right? And not for somebody to begin to do it.
We must take a break in another 5 minutes, but I want to bring General Esekhaigbe into this conversation. Now, there is a joke amongst the circle of journalists that you could actually write the story of elections in Nigeria 2 days, 3 days before and keep it. And after that election, you wouldn't be so far from the truth. Meaning that all you have to do is just change the name of the actors depending on what prevails. Now, it also is clear that Nigerians do not lack the intelligence to deal with this peculiar situation, which keeps recurring year after year, decade after decade, because these are the same set of things that we talk about on the night of every election. Yeah. Now, so we have the intelligence, we are educated enough. What quality does the rest of the world have that we do not have in Nigeria, and by extension, the rest of Africa?
Thank you,
are you there?
Kayode. You see, one problem we have in this country is, the inability to overcome our neophobia. That is, the will to do new things, to experiment on new things. Like you rightly said, after every exercise, there's what they call after-action review. And most of the reasons why a system failed are identified. Then the next thing for a rational person to do is, what do we do to avoid, those pitfalls that led to the failure of the system? But we glossed over them. That is why we discussed earlier that every election cycle, we have the same problem that plagued the elections, finding themselves back to plague subsequent elections. Now, there are fundamental issues that must be addressed. Putting round pegs in round holes. Nigeria has a lot of, human resources that can fit into some of these things and do them properly. But in the recruitment process, where you don't give, a leverage, to merit, you are going to have some of these issues. For instance, in logistics as a word has been overflogged without really grasping what logistics is all about. Logistics is not a program, but it's a process. And it has principles. Those principles, if they are not followed, you will not get to the right direction. What are these principles? You must have foresight, you have flexibility, economy of effort, simplicity, and cooperation. So look at the value chain of logistics system and see whether these principles have been aptly applied. And we have a kind of, syndrome in Nigeria of, this is how we used to do it. If this is how you used to do it, and he has not been successful, won't you devise a new method to give a better job? Even in the security architecture, that's what they call, you know, quarterly review, annual review, or biannual review. It is not a straitjacket thing. What works in one country will not work in Nigeria. So everything we want to do must have elements of homegrown ingredients to be able to support our system. Like the legal mindset, when you deliberately refuse to plan, you are planning to fail. Look, today we are here discussing the same issues. Tomorrow we are going to come back here discussing the same security issues. Now he talked about the political gladiators. And he looked at the history of Nigerian elections. Violence has been one recurrent theme. But what actions have we taken to address this orgy of violence that plague our elections? These gladiators that he has identified, what action has been taken, you know, to bring them to justice? We say nobody is above the law. If nobody is above the law, why do we allow these people to do it over and over again and they go free? In the last segment, we talk about these criminals being sponsored by these political gladiators. Even when they get arrested, the next day, the same political gladiators, they use their political influence to get them released. So when you have a broken criminal justice administration, you cannot do anything right. It is right time we look at ourselves squarely and identify the problems and make a conversation. Do we want to overcome these problems or want to continue to gloss over it?